Sometimes you have expectations of people, and naturally, people are not always going to live up to your expectations. That is a given. But most normal people, sorry, let me rephrase that. Most people who understand the fundamentals of communication are likely to tell you that they are unable to meet a particular expectation. You replan, you readjust, and you find a way of moving on, right? However, sometimes there is a special group of individuals who fail to meet your expectations, but fail to communicate why they fail to meet said expectations and give you a completely fabricated image of your particular expectations. This is a bad way of explaining the concept of shifting of goalposts, which is the subject of today's episode. And this is why you should be wary of people who shift goalposts, and why it is a sign of terrible communication skills, and why you should reevaluate your connections with certain people if they continuously shift the goalpost. But before we get into all of that, hi, welcome to A World Is No End. My name is Alan, I'm your host. Welcome back if you're a returning listener. Welcome if you're somebody new. My introductions will never be consistent. But yeah, today we're going to be talking, as I alluded to, about the concept of shifting goalposts. This is inspired by a conversation that I had many, many months ago with a good friend of mine. And essentially, what happened is, without giving away too many details, because obviously I'm not publicizing anyone's life story out to the internet, suffice to say, my friend and their parents had an agreement of some sorts. The parents switched up on said agreement and left my friend in an otherwise uncomfortable situation, and a situation that they did not account for and didn't plan for. Eventually, I believe there was some sort of mitigation that happened, but for the time being, my friend was really, really stressed by the happenings that happened. And this prompted us to have a conversation about whether or not the behavior of my friend's parents constituted shifting of goalposts. And ever since then, I've had it in my head that I maybe want to briefly talk about that and, talk about how shifting of goalposts is like bad for communication with any form of relationship, right? Because you cannot suddenly change expectations without informing an individual of particular changes. That's bad communication. And I thought it would be nice to have a discussion about that. Ideally, I would like to have this discussion with somebody else, but you know, I don't have anyone else to talk to, so you're going to hear my thoughts on shifting goalposts, right? All right, cool. So, what is shifting the goalpost? In my very bad introduction, sort of like alluded to what constitutes shifting the goalpost. It is when imaginary party A and imaginary party B communicate and agree to plan C, right? Let's use the analogy of a parent and child, really, right? Because I know most of you can relate to this. Remember when you're in O level, probably, and you were told, okay, if you get 10 A's on all of your subjects. Let's say you're doing 10 subjects, and like, if you get 10 A's, I'm going to buy you a new phone, right? You work your ass off, you get your 10 A's, you go back to your parents and you be like, okay, I got the 10 A's, can I get the new phone? Your parents proceed to say, we'll see if you get 15 points. You see that it's like this dramatic shift in expectations. The other party, your parents, party B, goes outside of whatever agreement that you initially had and changes the standard by which they are determining your success that quantifies getting a particular reward type of situation. So essentially, it's when one party steps outside of a set understanding and changes the standards for what meets the criteria for this understanding to function, and they decide to, do their own thing. So much so that when you come back to them within the context of the original understanding, I'm like, okay, A, B, C, D has happened. So it's time for you to fulfill EFG, part of this agreement or this situation. Or it's, oh, remember that we talked about this, and that, and you said you would do this, and that. And then all of a sudden, this person is now saying, well, I never said I'd do that. I said maybe I would do this if the. Basically, they start giving you all of these many excuses and recontextualizing the entire situation, type of thing. So when they're recontextualizing the entire situation and creating an entirely new metric, that's them shifting the goalpost around. There was a particular objective that needed to be met. There was a criteria that previously existed. You communicated about this particular set of events. All of a sudden, by the whims of this person, that criteria has changed. You don't know what has led to the change. The change was never communicated to you, but the change exists. And now you're left in a position of being completely frustrated because how did we even get to this point, right? How did it get to the point where you felt like you could change the context of whatever we had previously communicated and do your own thing and then leave me as the individual who was party to this conversation blindsided because now I don't know what to do with this anymore because I had particular expectations and you changed the criteria of those expectations on your own. And it's a very frustrating situation. It purely goes down to bad communication because I would think if you are not in a place to fulfill a particular obligation, it is very okay to say, hey, I know we had agreed upon this, but in this particular moment, I am not able to do ABC. So, would it be possible to restructure our original plan so that we can still meet this particular goal? However, we now have to do it under these particular circumstances. So, going back to our example of your parents and your O level results, right? It's very easy to then sit down and have a conversation along the lines of, hey, I know we promised to give you a phone if you got 10 A's, right? We promised we'd buy you a new phone. However, right now, there are various economic constraints. We're trying to, secure your fees for A level type situation, wada, wada, wada. So it's really not feasible for us to get you a new phone. So would it be okay for you to continue using the phone that you have for the time being? And then we'll see after A level if, or later on in A level to see if the financial situation would have been significantly improved to, allow us to facilitate said promise. It's it's not the best way of phrasing it, but you get the general idea, right? Of you need to be able to then communicate why certain expectations are not being realized in a particular moment and how you move forward from those expectations not being realized type of situation, right? Again, it boils down to communicating to the person who is affected by the shift and restructuring and replanning how you then move on. And I think part of it, aside from bad communication, is undermining the ability of the person who you need to communicate this to understand the particular situation. Like, back to our example, the O level example, I feel like most parents, this is now a personal opinion, I feel like most parents, right, grossly underestimate the ability of their children to be understanding within the context of particular situations. Like, yeah, your child is going to be immature, but if you explain to them a particular situation and you haven't raised them to be a spoiled brat, I'm pretty sure they'll be able to see that, oh, no, it's not like they're trying to disappoint me. It's not like they're not living up to their promise. It's just that this particular situation dictates that they are unable to do this at the current point in time. And of course, there's going to be disappointment, which is a very natural feeling and a feeling that you should talk about when you're doing this entire restructuring thing. Because again, shifting goalposts, again, is a very communication based issue. Like, your inability to communicate is what creates the issues that surround shifting goalposts. Anywho, right? I feel like when you then have that necessary communication around why the shift has to happen, the shifting of the goalpost does not become a big problem. Shifting of goalposts is only a problem when it is not communicated. Which brings me to, you should be very wary of people who switch up on you consistently. Like, it is a very consistent habit of theirs that they promise X, they do not fulfill X, they never explain why they didn't fulfill X. And it is a continuous rotation of them shifting expectation with no explanation. That is a very toxic individual to keep around in your life, right? Because at the end of the day, if the net harm of them continuously playing with your emotions and failing to communicate is greater than whatever benefit that they give you in the context of your life, then you should not be around an individual whose entire personality is continuously playing a guessing game with you. They do not value your time, effort, and planning. They undermine your ability to communicate and compromise, and that is just a mess of a situation to be in, right? No one wants that for themselves. So if you have a person in your life who continuously shifts goalposts, perhaps it is time for you to reevaluate that relationship and ask yourself, is there really a net positive in this friendship, this relationship, in this partnership, whatever the case may be? Is the net positive that I get from being associated with this individual or these individuals, is the net positive so great that it outweighs the shifting of goalposts? And if not, is their lack of communication a big enough problem to warrant my inability to be consistently within their life? And if that lack of communication bothers you so much, then it is very necessary to, at the end of the day, reevaluate that relationship and find a way of moving on, right? Right. Sounds simple enough, but I know it's never that simple. Human interaction is complicated. It takes time to work your way up to having these kinds of conversations. So, my template for this situation would be somewhere along the lines of the advice that I then gave my friend, where you go to this person and you're like, "Hi, person, remember when you talked about A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you said that you're going to do this, and that, and we planned that it was going to be around this context, and then later on you then said this to me, which was outside of the scope of the previous communication that I couldn't have planned for. It really did affect me that you did not see the need to communicate ABC to me, given the fact that I was also going to be greatly affected by your decision to do XYZ. I would appreciate it in future if you cannot live up to 1, 2, 3. It's better that you communicate to me and we find a way of restructuring and replanning. I am not opposed to changing plans, but I would rather you tell me straight up why it is you could not live up to ABC so that we can work together to figure out a different plan. Feel free to readjust this template as you see fit, but I think it's a generally good starting point if you are trying to have that conversation with somebody about shifting goalposts and so forth and how that affects you. If you found this helpful, great. If you thought everything I said was absolute garbage, also great. But otherwise, yeah. Thank you for listening to me ramble. And I will ramble again another time. Bye.